And I think there's a possibility that you'll get people a little more willing to vote for that, for the townwide override, if they think that part of that override is going to begin a return to them as opposed to money that just disappears and disappears and disappears. And if they think that there's a possibility that in the not that distant future, we can stop having these overrides, we can at least begin to grow along with the rest of the towns around us. There's not, every time you try to do this, there's going to be other things vying for that money. There's going to be an override every single time. It won't get smaller. It'll only get bigger. So perhaps the concept that you just brought up of a special town meeting and a special election, now there's a cost to those. And of course, our thought was not to incur those costs on top, you know, I mean, because having its own forum would be preferable. Initially, our discussion with the board centered around a special town meeting, prior to town meeting, with this as the only agenda item. That's kind of what we wanted in order to give it that kind of attention, that kind of specific attention. But that didn't work out. We were going to get put on originally, I guess, with other items, and then of course the recommendation was for us to wait till the fall. But I think there is some energy now, and I think that energy comes from a number of people who see this as a possibility to not keep having these overrides, and so they're more likely to vote for both of them, knowing that one of them is going to have a return.
Well, I would like to say, if you feel as a group that you have enough time between now and town meeting to get enough people on board with you that they'll make the connection between the two dots, I would be willing to hold my recommendation for an article until town meeting. I'd be willing to put it on there and hold my recommendation.
Okay, well, we've met with other groups, and so there is a core group that's already in favor of this. So a new group has come along. So it's not just a single interest or something. There's a number of people. The more people that find out about it and learn what the possibilities are and see the potential of it and see the work that's gone into it and the position that it's in. I mean, we're in a good spot right now. We've done a taking on a piece of land. We have already pipes in the ground, as Gary mentioned, and we're a good ways along towards having things ready to move along, to move right into the engineering phase. So this isn't, we're not just starting, you know, we're there.
My only real concern is I don't want to see this die here. And I know you said you could restructure things, but I think you guys have a good plan, and I don't want to see it get shot down along with another override that's get the town.
We'll keep getting, and then we can lump it with a different override, and then with a different override.
I
There's no
agree.
end to it.
My issue
Chair,
is,
please.
my issue is I don't want you to get lost in you know, everything else that's going on. You know, what the override that's going to be out is going to be hotly contested. And this, while being so important to our future, is kind of, you know, another thing. Even though it's conceivably got longer range, much more impact. But Michael's idea of a separate election is really not a bad idea, and that's another option, not to wait till November. It'll give you more time. It does have a certain amount of cost for us, but it will give you more time to get ready, and it'll also give you people their undivided attention. It won't impact the override that's out there now, that's going to be out there now. And like I say, you separate from the two. So people who come to vote no won't vote no on you automatically. People who come to vote yes won't vote. You know, a lot of people, my fear would be some people would vote yes, but they would see two overrides and they'd want to vote no on one. People like to vote no, you know, on overrides. So they like to. And so they'll come and they'll see yours and say, well, I'm going to vote yes on this one and no on this one. So to separate it is really, I think, an advantage to you. I really do. Now, whether we have a special town meeting, I mean, that's something for us to discuss. But I think that some of the things Steve has raised are accurate, that we don't have a number yet. We have that $10 million number that was suggested to us originally, but, you know, we really don't have a number. So I'm in favor. I mean, absolutely, this is absolutely the thing. But I don't want you to get lost in, you know what I'm saying? I don't want you to get lost in the override elections. That's my fear. But if you really want to do it, you know, it's something else.
Rita?
I think I'm one of about 200 educated people in town, kind of what's going on and what's going on. But I have to be honest with you. After the meeting the other night, and Mike asked me to come to the meeting, I think that you're gonna have 500 people, that the selectmen have to sell it, and the finance have to sell it. I mean, I've heard all of, we've all run for election, we've all called everybody things to vote for. And everybody said, I back this, I back this, I back this, I back this. Well, sometimes people can back it differently. Dr. Trojan took it back the other day, and, well, he's got another group out there selling the schools for him. And we really gone out here and sold what we think is right. I mean, we had a group the other night, cutting town government, because you get everything, town government saying, school gets everything. This is crazy. You've got an influx of money coming in, and once you lose those good customers, you're not getting them back. That's what they're saying now. They can go out and give you a list of who's gonna sign up. And they want it because in the long run, it's gonna save so much more money. Talk to the horseshoe, ask how much he spent on his,
Right.
His project, and if he could have got it through the town, how much he would have saved. Every businessman will jump at the chance to get this. And you keep losing good customers, good customers, good customers. You're the leaders. We're not asking you to ask the public what they think. We're asking you to tell them why it's a shame not to back it now. I think there are two things. You've got the 500 people there that are gonna hear it, and they should hear it, and you people should explain to them, why this revenue is important.
Gentleman in the rear.
Sean Delaney, 76th Street. I think this is over.
Come up here, because I think you're so far back that,
Sean Delaney, 7 Dick Street. I think this is a very worthwhile project for the reinvestment of this town to bring in some financial resources that we desperately need. I just think April town meeting is the inappropriate time. I feel as though I'm reasonably informed, reasonably educated on the issues in town, but I don't think the general public or the community at large is very well educated about this particular project. I think the 6-month time lag between now and October town meeting is the time that Mr. Prisco, I think, can be spent to educate the general public and get them educated, get them to understand the reinvestment in this town through this project is very worthwhile. More appropriate for October town meeting and then the election in November. I think the idea of a special town meeting, I don't believe it's money well spent for this town. I think the meeting on Wednesday night in which it was arrived at in terms of a number, in which we have to seek an override, which fortunately it looks like that's the way we have to go. I would like to see that number reduced in terms of what we're asking for. I believe this community, historically, has been adverse to overrides, and I don't think that's the way education and town budgets should be financed. I would like to see you as a board look more closely at each department and see what other cuts can be made before we talk about cuts to personnel. And that's my position.
who hasn't had an opportunity to speak?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
could I
Mr.
just raise a point of clarification? The placement of a ballot question, debt exclusion question is a 2/3 vote. 2/3 of 5 members is 4 members. So I would suggest to the board that unless you have 4 members of the selectmen that are ready to proceed in placing a ballot question on, the placement of an article before town meeting is really a moot point, because you wouldn't have the votes to put it on the ballot. So it's just a point of clarification for the board's interest.
Okay, before we deal with that issue, I want to make a statement here. Back some time ago, I don't know the exact date when I had this conversation, when this subject first came up, I had, at that time, said I didn't think that it was a good idea to do it at the April town meeting, that I had urged the chairman to bring it forth as a report at the April town meeting. Make a report to the community, introduce what you're planning to do, lay out the time frame. October town meeting, we vote on the question, and on the November election, we put an override question. I did say at the time that if the committee came back and said that they wanted to go forward, I wouldn't vote to block it. But that was then. And I have to say this evening that I am not in support of putting an override question on the May ballot for a number of reasons. But one big significant one at this point in time is this board, although I believe 100% of the members sitting here are in support of this project, we have not come to an agreement on what was presented associated with 2080, 2575. We haven't had a discussion of that, and we have literally done no work associated with the aspects of financing. I think I raised a question back then associated with the fact that, and I may be wrong about the exact numbers, but on a 20/80 split, the town would be on a $40 million project, which I believe is the number that we were told, right? 20% of that would be borne by the town as a whole, and that would be a tax rate override. A portion of that override would be paid for by through taxes as an exempt debt project over probably a 30-year bonding. However, before a betterment can be collected, I believe the pipe has to be in front of the individual home or office. And I was led to believe that it was going to take and cost $17 million roughly to get to that point. In other words, to get the structure to where you could start your collection. It was an investment of about $17 million, of which the town would have to borrow that money, and the entire town would be paying the interest on that money until the betterments came in, and then there would be, the betterments still would pay their 80% share. So that whole financing structure is a mystery to me at this point. It's certainly a mystery to the board, and I think we need to have all that information out. If I'm going to get up at town meeting to support this thing, and I want to support it, I need to be able to answer those kinds of questions, and we don't have the answers yet. And why October was picked was felt that we'd get through this busy budget cycle, which we knew going in was going to be a big problem, and we would begin the process of putting together the financial plan so that we can make a reasonable presentation at town meeting and sell this thing. Now, the one suggestion that came up associated with, and I've heard this concern about the November election, it's, we're going to have people who's interested on the presidential election, and they may go and vote and then vote no on everything else because they really only went to vote on the presidential election, and that necessarily, although it might have been a broader section of voters, it may not be really an interested and representative group of voters. So, from a timing point of view, this poses another issue. One of the problems we have with April, an April town meeting, is that we can't wait until town meeting decides whether to go forward or not before we have to decide on putting a ballot question on the ballot this year, just because of simple timing. The timing of the later timing of April town meeting versus the May ballot. We need 30 days notice. Turns out that the November election needs 90 days, so we actually would have to put a ballot question on the ballot, vote to put a question on the ballot in August, I believe.
August 4th.
August 4th. So again, we would be approaching October town meeting. We'd put the question on before we get to the point where town meeting decides whether or not to go forward with it. The idea of asking for a special town meeting, if we put a question on the October warrant and it passes, and then vote to put have a special election, right, has some merit. The negative of that is it's going to cost us an amount of money, and I don't remember what the number was.
The election will cost about $6,000.
$6,000? So we'd have to be prepared to invest $6,000 in a special election.
That include
If we
special
went,
town meeting?
No, it doesn't.
No, we wouldn't need a special town meeting. I'm thinking